I've spent years chasing approval from the people who should have been proud of me the most. But when my graduation day arrived, after all the sacrifices and hard work, my parents weren't there. Instead, I received a text. "Sorry, honey, the Anderson Super Bowl party was planned months ago. My name's Sarah Morgan, and I was the first in my family to graduate college. But as I walked across that stage alone, diploma in hand, I couldn't help but feel abandoned. This was supposed to be the day I proved everything I'd worked for was worth it. Instead, it felt like just another reminder that I'd never be enough for my parents." Growing up, I learned early on that my dreams were secondary to everything else. My father, Tom, worked construction jobs, and my mother, Linda, worked part-time as a cashier. They were always tired, stressed, and far too busy to care about what mattered most to me, my education. I watched other kids get praise for their academic achievements, their parents attending their school events, pushing them to do better. But for me, it was different. My parents only cared about survival. There was no room for aspirations beyond the paycheck at the end of the week. From the start, I was different. I spent my childhood in the dusty corners of my room, reading everything I could get my hands on. I remember devouring books by flashlight late at night, when everyone else was asleep. I didn't get help with my science projects. I did them alone. And when I got the highest grade on a test, my parents barely noticed. It wasn't because they didn't care, it was because they didn't know how to care. By third grade, I had already won my first science fair. My project on plant photosynthesis took weeks of planning and research, but neither of my parents showed up to see it. My dad had a poker game, and my mom didn't want to drive in light rain. In middle school, when I made honor roll every quarter, my parents skipped the ceremony because their favorite restaurant had a 2-for-1 special that same night. By the time high school rolled around, the pattern was clear. My achievements didn't matter to them. When I became valedictorian, they complained about having to sit through the ceremony instead of celebrating my success. I couldn't understand it. Why did my parents act like everything I did was unimportant? Even when I applied to college, they barely reacted. I had to do it all on my own, applying in secret, hunting for scholarships on my own, and later convincing them that college wouldn't bankrupt us. When I finally got a partial scholarship to Northwestern, I tried to share the good news, only to have my father dismiss it as a waste of money. My mom at least pretended to be happy, but her first question was whether I'd be commuting so I could continue helping around the house. But I didn't give up. Despite the lack of support, I still managed to get accepted, still managed to prove that I was capable of achieving more than what my parents had ever imagined. But even when I was accepted to one of the best schools in the country, the reality was the same. They didn't care. They didn't understand the sacrifice. They didn't understand how hard I worked for this opportunity. And then, when the day finally came to walk across that stage and hold my diploma, I realized that all the years of effort had led me to a place of painful clarity. My family had never seen me, never truly recognized what I'd accomplished. I had done this all alone, and now I had to walk alone. When I walked across that stage alone, it wasn't just the empty seat beside me that felt wrong. It was the culmination of years of feeling unseen, unheard, and unimportant in my own family. The text from my mom about the Super Bowl party made everything crystal clear. My graduation, the accomplishment I had worked my entire life for, was never going to matter to them. I wasn't the golden child. I was the one who didn't need attention. Kevin, my older brother, always had their full support, while I was expected to fend for myself. Growing up in Oakwood Heights, everything always seemed to revolve around Kevin. He was the one who got the attention, the praise, and the opportunities. My dad, Tom, a hard-working but distant construction worker, always found the time to show up for Kevin's baseball games or cheer him on at his school events. Kevin could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. He was the perfect son, the one who was expected to follow in my father's footsteps. And then there was me, quiet, studious, and far more focused on books and science projects than sports or popularity. I was always second, always overlooked. From the moment I could remember, Kevin was the one who had the spotlight. When I won my elementary school science fair with a project on plant photosynthesis, my parents didn't show up. My father had a poker game he didn't want to miss, and my mother didn't want to drive in the rain. But when Kevin scored a goal in his soccer game, my parents were there in full force, cheering louder than anyone else. I got good grades, sure, but I never felt like they were proud of me. When I made honor roll in middle school, they skipped the recognition ceremony to go out for dinner at their favorite restaurant. Kevin's achievements were always celebrated, while mine were ignored. High school was no different. I worked harder than I ever had, studying late into the night, earning top marks, and when I was named valedictorian, I thought maybe just maybe this time they would see me. But no, my parents didn't attend the ceremony. They didn't care to be there for what was the most important day of my academic career. They complained about how boring the event was and how long they had to sit. I was crushed, but somehow I pushed it all down, convincing myself it didn't matter. They didn't know how hard I'd worked or what I'd given up. They didn't even care to understand. When it came time for college, I applied in secret. I was terrified they would talk me out of it or belittle my dreams like they always did. I used fee waivers my guidance counselor helped me with, carefully crafting essays in the corners of the house while my mom watched TV and my dad complained about the utility bills. I hid every acceptance letter, shoving them into a box under my bed. I knew they wouldn't get it. They never did. The day I received my partial scholarship to Northwestern was the first time I let myself feel excited. I rehearsed for hours how I would tell them, practicing responses to their inevitable skepticism. And when I finally told them, the joy I had imagined was replaced by disappointment. My dad shrugged it off, saying college was a waste of money. My mom asked if I'd be commuting so I could still help with the housework. Despite the constant negativity, I didn't give up. I found a way to make it work. I applied for every scholarship I could, took out loans, and worked multiple jobs while attending school full-time. Every semester was a balancing act. I worked at a campus cafe and later secured a research assistant job to help pay the bills. There was no time for anything else. But through it all, I held on to the hope that one day they would see how hard I was trying, how far I had come, and maybe, just maybe, they would be proud of me. But with every phone call home, I was reminded of my place. My parents would ask about my grades, sure, but only to make sure I wasn't spending too much money or wasting time. When I told them about acing my first college exam, my mom interrupted with a story about the neighbor's dog. My dad's response was always something like, "That's nice, but don't let it go to your head." I felt invisible, ignored, and isolated, even though I was working harder than I ever had before. It wasn't until graduation day that the full weight of it all hit me. I had done everything I could to break the cycle, to make them proud, but in the end, it didn't matter. They had already chosen Kevin. I wasn't part of their vision for the family's future. I was just the other one, the one who didn't matter. And in that moment, walking across the stage alone, I realized that I had to stop seeking their approval. If I ever wanted to feel truly seen, I would have to do it for myself. Graduation day was supposed to be the moment I had been working towards for years. A culmination of all the late nights, the sacrifice, the unrelenting effort. As I stood on the stage at Northwestern, diploma in hand, I was filled with a sense of accomplishment, but that feeling was short-lived. The excitement that had been building in me for months suddenly evaporated when I realized my parents weren't there. I looked out at the sea of families cheering on their graduates, all those proud faces. But I didn't see my parents. I didn't hear their voices calling my name, offering their congratulations. My heart dropped. I had done everything for this moment, every sleepless night in the library, every extra shift at the cafe, every moment of doubt I had pushed through. And yet, my parents weren't there to witness it. I had tried to hold on to hope. For weeks leading up to the ceremony, I had called them every Sunday, counting down the days until graduation. My mom had assured me each time, "Of course we'll be there, sweetie. Don't worry about it. We've already requested time off work." I believed her. I thought that maybe, just maybe, they would finally see me, finally acknowledge everything I had accomplished. But as the ceremony began, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was all just another disappointment. I walked across that stage alone, smiling for the photographer, but inside, I felt like I was crumbling. I had worked so hard to break free from the cycle of neglect and indifference, but on this day, I realized that it wasn't about breaking the cycle for theme, it was about breaking it for myself. After the ceremony, I couldn't stay. I couldn't pretend like everything was okay. I walked out of the auditorium, still holding my diploma, and headed straight to the parking lot. There, I let it all out. I had been holding back the tears, trying to keep it together for so long, but now I couldn't stop them. I cried harder than I ever had before, not just for the absence of my parents on that day, but for all the years of disappointment, of feeling invisible, of never being enough for them. I was angry, but I was also heartbroken. This wasn't just about missing graduation. It was about the years of feeling like I had to prove myself to people who would never fully appreciate me. My parents had never understood the sacrifice it took to get here. They had never truly seen me as more than just the quiet, studious child who kept to herself. They never asked about my dreams or my future, always dismissing them as irrelevant or impractical. Even when I worked harder than anyone, even when I succeeded against all odds, they didn't care. But as I sat there in the parking lot, wiping away my tears, something clicked. I realized that the love and validation I had been seeking from my parents would never come. They were never going to be the parents I needed. They were never going to be proud of me in the way I had hoped. And that was okay. For the first time, I understood that I didn't need them to see me as enough. I didn't need their approval to validate my success. I had done this on my own. I had fought for this, not for them, but for me. I had broken free from the cycle, but I needed to break free from their expectations, too. That day, I decided to stop waiting for my parents to show up for me. I had to stop giving them the power to define my worth. I wasn't going to let them control how I saw myself anymore. I had already proven everything I needed to prove, not to them, but to myself. The disappointment of that day, as painful as it was, became the catalyst for my transformation. It became the day I truly started living for me. It wasn't until the day of my graduation that I finally reached the breaking point. The text from my mom about the Super Bowl party hit me like a ton of bricks. My chest tightened as I reread the message, trying to process the words that I could barely believe. "Sorry, honey, the Anderson Super Bowl party was planned months ago." In that moment, the weight of everything I had been carrying for years came crashing down. How could they do this? How could they not see how important this day was? All the years I had sacrificed, all the hard work, every sleepless night I had spent in libraries, balancing part-time jobs while juggling coursework, trying to prove I was capable, worthy, and deserving of their pride. And still, they didn't care. The emptiness I had felt in their absence during the ceremony became suffocating. I had kept it together through the speech, through the walk across the stage, but once the crowd dispersed and I was alone, reality hit me hard. I couldn't stand the thought of pretending anymore. The anger, the betrayal, the sense of abandonment flooded over me all at once. My parents had missed my biggest moment, the moment I had dreamed of since childhood, and they were off at a party for a game they'd never even been interested in. I walked away from the stage, into the parking lot, clutching my diploma like it was the last thing I had to hold on to. The tears came quickly, and I couldn't stop them. I felt so small in that moment, so invisible. The parking lot, usually filled with the joyful noise of graduates celebrating with their families, now felt eerily silent, like the entire world had gone on without me. I wasn't part of it, not even on my own day. But what hurt the most wasn't just their absence. It was the realization that this had been my life, in so many ways, up until that point. For years, I had been seeking approval from people who didn't know how to give it. I had worked so hard to earn their love, their recognition, but all I had gotten in return was indifference. They were never going to be the parents I wanted, the ones who cheered me on, who celebrated my victories, or who saw my worth. And that's when I understood, for the first time in my life, that I needed to stop waiting for them to come around. This wasn't just about missing graduation. It was about everything leading up to it. It was about all those moments when I'd quietly celebrated my successes alone because they were too distracted or uninterested to notice. It was about all those years of proving myself, only to find out that I would always be second to Kevin, always overlooked. I was tired of being invisible. I was tired of trying to prove myself to people who would never appreciate what I had to offer. I knew then that I couldn't keep living my life this way. I couldn't keep waiting for them to validate me, to make me feel like I mattered. I had done this on my own. I had earned my place, and I wasn't going to let their absence define my success. I deserved better than this. I deserved to be seen, to be recognized, to be celebrated for who I was and what I had achieved. As I sat in my car, tears streaming down my face. I made a decision. I was going to let go. I was going to stop waiting for them to give me the approval I had always longed for. I didn't need it anymore. I had everything I needed to move forward in my life, and that was enough. I would continue on this journey, not for them, but for me. That day, in the parking lot, I made the decision to move on, to stop looking back and to stop seeking the approval of those who would never see me for who I truly was. It wasn't just the end of my graduation day, it was the end of seeking validation from my family. It was the beginning of learning to stand on my own, to value myself, and to let go of the toxic patterns that had kept me chained for so long. The decision I made that day in the parking lot, crying alone, holding my diploma, wasn't just a moment of emotional release. It was the beginning of something much bigger. I had spent so much of my life waiting for my parents to validate me, to love me the way I needed. But that day I realized something crucial. If I was ever going to be truly happy, I had to stop waiting. I had to stop chasing something they weren't capable of giving me. It was time to take control of my life and my future, free from their expectations, their neglect, and their emotional indifference. As I drove home from the ceremony, wiping away the last of my tears, I thought about what came next. I could keep looking back, replaying the hurt and the disappointment, or I could use that pain as fuel to propel myself forward. That's what I chose. I knew that for years, I had allowed my family's lack of support to shape the way I saw myself. But I didn't need to do that anymore. I had earned my degree. I had built something for myself with nothing but grit and determination. I had already proven to myself what I was capable of. And now, I had to prove it to the world. The first step was setting boundaries. I had spent so many years feeling emotionally drained after every phone call, every visit, every interaction with my parents. But I couldn't keep sacrificing my emotional well-being just to appease them. I couldn't keep letting them use me, treat me as if I was only valuable when I was meeting their needs. It was time to draw a line. So I made the decision to distance myself, at least for a while. I didn't reach out to them after graduation, and I didn't respond to their texts or calls. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I felt guilty for not letting them back into my life immediately. But I knew that guilt was just a product of years of conditioning, a result of their manipulation. For the first time, I prioritized my own mental health. I had learned that boundaries weren't about punishing anyone, they were about protecting myself. Meanwhile, I focused on building the future I wanted. I landed a job with a social work agency in a small town not far from the city, where I could help families who had gone through struggles similar to my own. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was meaningful. It was fulfilling. And most importantly, it was mine. I poured myself into my work, giving it everything I had, knowing that for the first time in my life, I was doing something that felt right. I wasn't doing it to make anyone else proud. I was doing it for me. The next few months were a whirlwind of adjustments. I moved into a new apartment, one that was small but cozy, a space that felt like home. I bought furniture I actually liked, painted the walls the colors I'd always wanted, and slowly began filling it with things that made me feel at peace. My apartment became my sanctuary, a physical manifestation of the new life I was building for myself, one where I called the shots, one where I didn't have to wait for anyone's approval. When my parents eventually reached out, I was ready. They wanted to talk, they wanted to meet, they wanted to discuss the things they had missed while I was busy living my life. I didn't rush to answer, but when I did, I was firm. I told them that I had built my life on my own terms, and while I would always love them, I wasn't going to allow them to hurt me anymore. I set clear boundaries, explaining that while I was open to having a relationship, it needed to be one where my needs were also respected. Over time, I learned to have those difficult conversations with them. They weren't easy, but I knew it was necessary for my own growth. The process wasn't perfect. There were missteps, moments of guilt, and times when I still felt like I was the little girl hoping for validation, but I had taken back control of my life. I had stopped waiting for them to change, and in doing so, I changed. Today, I stand in a place of peace. My relationship with my parents is different. We don't talk every day, but we've reached a place of mutual respect. I've learned that while family can hurt you, they don't have to define your future. That future is mine to create, and I will never again let anyone take that away from me. In the end, I realized that sometimes the most painful betrayals lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Walking across that stage alone didn't mark the end of my journey, it was just the beginning of my true independence. And I know, now more than ever, that I am worthy of every success that comes my way.